Hi, my name is Michelle Young, and today we're going to be talking about compassionate self-forgiveness and how to use compassionate self-forgiveness to clear energetic blockages. Compassionate self-forgiveness is one of my favorite tools. It really does help us to reframe some of the misperceptions that we have about ourselves and others. We can use compassionate self-forgiveness to eliminate judgments we've made on ourselves, or judgments we've made on others, even judgments that we've made on society. And it helps us to have more compassion for the greater whole of our collective consciousness. Now, we know that everyone's perception and everyone's verbalization is going to be different based on their experience. And that's how we frame our cognitive world. Our world is really made up of the thoughts, the feelings, the memories, and sensations that we have experienced, and we use them to shape our perception of reality. If you ask siblings what their life was like growing up, both siblings will have a completely different perspective based on their experience. And this just goes to show you that our perception and the story we place around that perception is not universally true. Even when we're absolutely married to it, it doesn't hold true for everyone on the planet. So then how can we get to a more consistent truth? How can we find the truth of our being amidst all of these perceptions and verbalizations that cloud our ability to see? In Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, we talk about these thoughts, feelings, memories as perceptions and verbalizations that get stored in our memory bank as samskaras or behavioral patterns. We begin to tell ourselves stories based on these samskaras, and oftentimes we buy into these stories. Many times these stories create limiting beliefs or judgments that prevent us from living in our authentic truth. In this video today, we're going to look at how to identify the judgments that we've placed on ourselves and others, and how to clear those energetic blockages using compassionate self-forgiveness. Perhaps you've had an experience in your life where you had an opportunity. Maybe it's an opportunity to take over a project at work, or maybe it's an opportunity to develop a relationship with a particular friend or a potential significant other. For some of us, the opportunity is quickly overshadowed by limiting beliefs that we're not enough or we can't do what we've been asked to do. These are perceptions and verbalizations that have taken root in our psyche and created limiting beliefs or judgments about how we are in the world in relation to other people. These are fundamentally not true. Every single being on the planet has infinite potential, and every single being is whole and complete just as they are. Nevertheless, these thoughts might creep in and make you feel less than whole, or maybe even unworthy of love or relationships. And this exercise might help you to eliminate some of those energetic blockages, preventing you from standing in your truth and being the light that you truly are. When we judge ourselves, we are buying into the idea that we are a certain way. And oftentimes, these ideas are not in alignment with the truth of our being. You are a divine being in a human experience. You are perfect just the way you are. My teacher used to say, "You don't need to do another pose. You have everything you need right now." And I believed her, hook, line, and sinker. In fact, I used compassionate self-forgiveness to help work through some of my material that kept me in these loops of samskaras, patterns, that I kept going through over and over again. The first step in applying compassionate self-forgiveness to the limiting beliefs that are holding you back is to identify what the limiting beliefs are. How have you judged yourself? How have you judged others? How have you judged society or maybe even your environment? Identifying these judgments will lead us down the road to identifying why we buy into the judgments that we buy into. For example, let's say that I sit down to write a book. I'm really excited about this new project. I've been wanting to write a book for quite some time. I've just never had the time, and now I do. So I sit down at my computer and I begin to write. A few paragraphs in, this sneaking, nagging voice comes into my train of thought, telling me that I can't do it. No one will ever read my book. Now, this limiting belief is based on a judgment that my writing isn't good enough, or that my book won't be successful because I'm not famous enough. So I have to ask myself, is this judgment true? Well, of course it's not true. I know my writing is good enough for people to read and enjoy. And I also know that you don't have to be famous to write a book and be successful. So the first thing I'm going to do is forgive myself for buying into the idea that I can't write a book that people would want to read. And I'm going to keep going. I'm going to forgive myself for buying into the idea that I'm not famous enough to write a book. Is there anything else that comes up? Sure, of course. I'm going to keep forgiving myself until I feel a sense of calm and contentment washing over my body. When I practice compassionate self-forgiveness, I do it in a journal. I sit down and I identify the judgment. In this case, the judgment is, I'm not a good enough writer to write a book. And then I ask myself, is that true? And I physically write out, no, it's not true. I ask myself what is true. And for this exercise, I recommend that you use one standard universal truth. The only thing that is true is you are a divine being in a human experience. That's it. Now that I've reframed the truth, I can forgive myself for buying into the idea that I'm not a good enough writer. And once I do that, I'm going to sit quietly and see if any other limiting beliefs come up around that initial limiting belief. Oftentimes, the initial limiting belief is just the tip of the iceberg. If we dig a little bit deeper, we might have pages and pages of limiting beliefs that we can work through. I forgive myself for buying into the idea that I'm not famous enough to be a writer. I forgive myself for buying into the idea that no one will read my book. I forgive myself for buying into the idea that people will think that I'm boring. I could go on and on like this for days and days and days. But at some point, I'm going to feel a sense of calm. Once you feel a sense of calm, a sense of release, then you're going to affirm your newfound understanding. And we do this with an I am statement. An I am statement is composed of I am and a adverb, an ly word, and a verb, followed by a statement in the present tense. So my I am statement might be, I am humbly recognizing the truth of my being and acknowledging my ability to write and create content that other people will enjoy and read. You could continue to write I am statements all day long, affirming your newfound understanding of your newfound belief. You see, the ego doesn't like to be wrong. If I tell my ego, no, ego, you're wrong, people will like what I read, my ego is going to continue to pout and sulk and feel unheard. I'm not acknowledging that my ego has something to say. Rather, I'm pushing my ego into the closet. But if I can tell my ego, oh, ego, I see you. This was a misunderstanding. Let's forgive ourselves for buying into this misunderstanding and reframe our new understanding. The ego comes along willingly. The ego feels like it's part of the party, and that's all it wanted in the first place. The ego is the function of the self that keeps you safe. Your ego is not separate from the pure awareness that is living and breathing you. And we don't want to kill it or squash it. That's a misunderstanding. Rather, we want to make friends with it. We want to explain to our ego that a lot of its beliefs are misunderstandings. They're coping mechanisms that have served us for a long time, but maybe they don't serve anymore. Once we can do this work, we can begin to live in our truth, in our wholeness, and we can begin to forgive others for judgments we might have placed on them in the past. This is a process, and I call this doing the work. When we really sit with our material, we're sitting with the monsters that make up the inner landscape of our mind. And rather than looking at them as monsters, we begin to work with them to help them to be re-enfranchised to our inner landscape, where they can help and contribute to the whole of our experience. We can take judgments, limiting beliefs. We can take aspects of our experience and our personality, like jealousy, fear, or manipulation, and we can work with them to help them to evolve into aspects that will support our being, that will support us living in our truth, and that will support us living in our wholeness. When we do this, we really do expand our consciousness, and we become more rooted in our natural, enlightened state. I hope you found this talk useful. I recommend that you use compassionate self-forgiveness with anything that is upsetting you. Over time, you'll learn how to use compassionate self-forgiveness to rid yourself of patterns of attachment and aversion. As you progress through your yogic practice and on your path, you'll begin to be able to clear blockages and burn through karmas that might have been holding you in patterns of samskara. This is the work. This is the way to liberation. Be well, yogis. Namaste.